Hi guys, and welcome to the Limey Canadian channel. Now that is St Michael's Parish Church in Huyton, where the subject of today's video was a chorister. We are talking about Stuart Sutcliffe, the original bass player of the Beatles, who, if we turn around, in that corner there's a gate that'll take us to Huyton Parish Cemetery. And here we are at Huyton Parish Cemetery, just in the corner. Now, as I said, Stuart was the original bass player with the Beatles. A lot of people seem to think because he died in Hamburg on the 10th of April 1962, he was buried in Hamburg. That's not the case. He was brought back to England and buried here in Huyton. As I said, over the road behind us was where he was a chorister when he was a lot younger, before the days of John Lennon and the Beatles. Now, Stuart was a fantastic artist. He was also my favourite Beatle. The Hamburg days are probably the best days of the Beatles. Right, so as I said, Stuart died due to a brain hemorrhage. Now, there's a few theories surrounding how the hemorrhage occurred and what the initial cause was. One of them is that after a gig at Latham Hall in Seaforth, the band were jumped and Stu unfortunately had his head kicked in and his head thrown against the wall. It's believed that was. The other theory is that it's written in his sister's book, The Beatles Shadow, Stuart Sutcliffe's Lonely Hearts Club, is that it was John Lennon. Now, personally, I don't think it was John, but that's for people. That's for people who've got a lot more medical knowledge than me to determine, I guess. One thing I will say is that I met years ago, it was a long time ago, so about 16 years ago, I met Alan Williams, the Beatles' original manager, in the Jacaranda. And he used to be quite famous for, like, you go up to him, ask him for a story of the Beatles, and he'd always want a glass of red wine. Now, I went up to him and said, I'd like to talk about my favourite Beatle. And Alan went all sarky and went, John fucking Lennon. Everyone wants to know about John fucking Lennon. And I said, well, actually, I want you to tell me about Stuart Sutcliffe. His attitude completely changed. He went all nice and, he just turned around and said Stuart was a beautiful, beautiful guy. He was a lovely lad, a fantastic painter and artist, but he was never a Beatle. I disagree. If it wasn't for Stuart, the Beatles as we know them would never have happened. Stuart Ferguson Victor Sutcliffe was born in Edinburgh on the 23rd of June 1940. His dad moved down to Liverpool with work during the Second World War, and Stu ended up initially living in Huyton. They then moved to what is now, I think it's called Sefton Park Hotel on Egbert Drive, just outside Sefton Park. The family had a flat there. I'm not sure what rooms, but they had a flat there. Stuart went to Liverpool College of Art, where he was introduced to John Lennon through Rod Murray, I believe, and from then on he sold one of his paintings to the Moors and bought his Hoffner Presidents, joined the Quarrymen, and came up with the name of the Beatles. But Stu was so much more than just a Beatle. Stuart's influence on the Beatles, it can't be underestimated. When they moved to Hamburg, it was during the first tour, it was Stu that became mostly friends with the German crowd, with the X's. Stu was the first to adopt the famous Beatle haircut that Astrid's friends wore, and the whole arty side of the Beatles was predominantly down to Stuart and John. And I said Stuart came up with the name The Beatles, and he just looked by far the coolest. After the Beatles' second residency in Hamburg, Stuart decided to stay, study art, and stay with his now fiancée Astrid Kirke. So Paul McCartney took over on the bass, and the lineup that we know of the Beatles was nearly completed, of John, Paul, George and Pete. On 10th April 1962, after months of continuous headaches, Stuart collapsed. He was rushed to a hospital in Hamburg, where he died on the way. 3 days later, the Beatles came back to do another stint in Hamburg, only to find out that Stuart had passed. So this is my copy of Pauline's book. It is a great read. Like I said, I just don't buy the theory that it was John that caused Stuart's injuries. Well, thank you for watching this video to the end, and I hope you leave it a like. Thank you.